Hey, you might feel like it's doomed, that language learning just isn't for you. It might feel impossible to get there, so far away. I know what you're going through. I've been there. I know how frustrating and disappointing it feels. But keep hope, because in this video, I'm going to give you or show you the right paradigm shift you need to operate on your perception of challenge, failure, and language learning as a whole to overcome this plateau, no matter how long it's been going for. So much is possible when it comes to language learning. There is so much potential, so many new cultures to discover, new things to experience, and you just have the opportunity to discover yourself even. It's one of the most valuable skills of our modern society. But this comes with setbacks and difficulties. After watching this video, you will understand more clearly how language learning works as a whole, at least how I think it works, and you will have a better perception of it and of failure. That's very important. Now, I'm not selling anything to you. I'm not giving you any specific method you should use to learn a new language, as there are many. I just want to help you overcome your plateau, because I've been through this and I would have needed the advice I'm going to give you. Precepts. You see, we're in an era of all-time high communication rate. It's everywhere all the time. We're interconnected. And this had a huge impact on language learning. People don't learn the languages the same way, and more people are brought to language learning, which is great. I'm very happy that language learning is becoming more popular. There's so much more material online for any language and for anyone. But where there is a trend, some traffic, and some popularity, there's also money to be made. And in those last few years, we observed a huge increase of language learning related businesses. A lot of them offer real value and really help their users get to where they want to be. However, there is a second category of language learning businesses that are just here to make some money. And those businesses, through their communication and marketing, actually cause some harms. You see, they make language learning what it's not. A fun activity that you can do for 5 minutes a day, and that will compound into the user becoming fluent in often claimed record times, talking about a few weeks or a few months. And I'm kind of mad at those businesses. I won't name any names, but they put in the new language learners' minds some unrealistic expectation and perceptions about language learning, which causes them to be very disappointed when they are confronted to the reality, which is that language learning is not easy. It never has been. Even now with technology, it can help a lot. We have language translating services that are very, very easy to use and fast. We have more books, we have more theories, more everything. But it's still hard. Like I said, it's a very valuable skill, and what's worth to have is hard to get. So now I'm going to explain to you why I think that language learning is not easy. It's not an easy process. I don't know if you noticed this, but babies cry a lot. They spend a good amount of their time communicating to the outside world that they're uncomfortable, that they're being uncomfortable. That being through tears, sobs, and cries. Of course, baby develop, baby grow, they grow their teeth, their body is changing, and they have no other way to communicate that than through sob, tears, and cries. But it's not just that. Babies also have to learn how to interact and interpret the world that's around them through their very, very sensitive senses. And they also have to decode and understand what people are telling them and discern the sounds between one another and try to correlate the emotions they perceive to what they're hearing. And this is not a light process. If you look at the brain scan of a newborn, of an infant, and compare it to the one of a toddler, you see that it's not the same thing. It's much more developed. It's not just language learning, but language learning is a big part of it. Language learning starts to operate after a few months and ends at the end of teenhood, kind of, because we always learn. One can argue that it never ends because we always learn new words or new languages, if you're like me. Yeah, you might not see where I'm going with this, but hear me out. Learning a new language is violent. It's not an easy process. It's a fundamental structural change in your brain. It's nothing light. Tremendous results and structural change requires exceptional measures. It might sound a bit extreme and even a bit wicked. But, if you start skiing and you've never skied before, granted, you will fail. You will have bruises and you will experience some fear and all sorts of uncomfortable sensations. Of course, as you will fall, as you will practice, as you will have some realization, some just practice overall, you at some point will have some fun. It will be more comfortable. Well, it's the same thing with language learning. You need to fall. You need to experience discomfort in order to learn. If it's not unavoidable, if it's not inevitable, if it's not necessary for survival or perceived as necessary for survival, the changes, those big, important, inherent changes, substantial changes, won't happen. It just takes so much resources, so much effort. It's just like changing your brain structure. Do you realize how difficult that is? If it's not necessary, inevitable, and necessary for survival, it won't happen. Yeah, it sounds extreme, but my point is that if you just keep it light and keep it easy, and you don't ever experience discomfort as regards to if you don't experience discomfort when it comes to the language you're learning, when you're practicing, when you're learning, when you're experiencing the language, the changes just won't occur because it's not necessary. Now let's look at what's necessary for our survival that we cannot do without. We have hair. We have air. Without air for 5 minutes, we die. We have water. It takes a few days and we can't survive without water for a few days, but then we die. Food, a few weeks. Shelter, one can argue that we don't need shelter, but chances of survival diminish when we don't have a good shelter. Expel waste, but don't want to talk about that. And we have social interactions. Now, it varies from people to people. Some people need it daily, some people need it a bit less. But social interaction is kind of necessary for our survival as human beings. Without interacting with other people, you don't lead your life. So language learning is life. Language learning is human life. So the latter is going to help us, the latter condition of survival is going to help us start that learning, jumpstart this learning. Because once the learning is going, it's like a big engine. It takes effort to get it going. You need to start it. You can even crank start it. And then afterwards, it keeps running. Once your subconscious rightfully understands that learning the language you're trying to learn is necessary for your survival, then you will learn. And then it will be more easy. But how do you know if that change occurred or if you're still in that initial phase where you need to jumpstart this engine? Well, you feel it. It flows better. You read better, you retain vocabulary faster and more easily. You're just more excited and more enthusiastic when it comes to the language. And you might also catch your mind wondering, what does this mean? How could I say this or that in that language? How is this pronounced correctly? And then you know that the jumpstart has been effective. Now, how exactly do you do that? Well, through social interaction. You need to have some sort of discomfort when it comes to social interaction. And meeting people, making new friends is essential for that, because the initial phase of making friends gets awkward, it gets hard. You need to go out there and meet people. You need to The first experience you have with the culture, you might have a little bit of a shock, some misunderstandings, and all of that really triggers this necessary for survival phase. And I also discussed about this in another video. You can't speak a language consciously because it requires you to control many muscles and to think of a grammatical structure that makes sense, but also to pronounce stuff correctly, and it just doesn't cut it. We're smart, but we're not that good at that multi-dimensional tasking. Okay, now I'm going to give you a few tips and a few guidelines to avoid some traps and just to make your learning more effective and pleasing. My number one advice or guideline would be to not constrain your language learning. First of all, learning a language in 3 months, or like constraining on the time scale, is not a good idea. It might sound, well, it looks very appealing on paper, I'll give that to you, because it's like motivating, and it seems that will give you the right amount of will to study the language every day. But turns out that it's just going to slow you down a little bit, put some pressure on you, and it's pretty discouraging. I don't know. It's just not a good idea. And the second type of constraining is, I don't want to learn the future tense for now because it's harder than the present tense. But the truth is that language learning is so organic, it's such an adaptive process that you don't know what you will learn before what. And same thing with constraining on the time scale. You don't know when you will learn. There's no way to tell. It's such an organic process. Like I said, you need to keep like an open mind and be open to the new concepts that the world is feeding you after you know how to pronounce. Like, there's some stuff that you should do first. I discussed about this in another video. But once this is kind of okay, you need to be open to the experience. So you might learn some very advanced concepts before some basics. And you don't know when you're going to learn. It can take a year, it can take 3 months. That depends on people, depends on your experience with the language. My second point is that apart from the initial brutal triggering phase where you're uncomfortable and where you're kind of telling your subconscious that you should learn, you should keep it fun. And like I said, meeting people and making friends is the best way to do this, because at first it's uncomfortable, you need to go see people, scary, but then you learn to know them, you get more comfortable with the language, with their accent, yada yada, and it gets fun. Well, having friends is fun, right? You can also watch movies, read the press, or read books, whatever is fun for you. Keeping it fun is a big aspect. 1 word a day until I get fluent will never end. Why? There is a difference between a vocabulary list and the exact semantic of a word that is not translatable to other languages and that is deeply rooted in the culture and in the language itself. Besides, vocabulary is one thing, but putting it together in a way that is natural, that native speaker would use, it's much harder than just knowing the words. It's a mental gymnastic that you acquire while hanging out with people that speak the language. My fourth point is to stay cautious and vigilant when it comes to language learning apps. They're very appealing. Their marketing, their communication is very convincing, or perhaps persuading, but it just doesn't replace social learning. It gives you the false impression of achieving a level because you have levels and you have some streaks, or I don't know, I don't use them. And yeah, it gives you that false impression of progressing because you see the numbers going up. But turns out most people won't get to fluency using them because, like I said, there's a lack of social learning, and there's also a lack of speaking. Because even if you can speak to a screen a little bit, to some prompts, read some stuff out loud, it mainly consists in tapping on the keyboard and trackpad. Doesn't really cut it. If you use them, be cautious. Know that they're kind of after your money. That's their whole point, and they might not be super truthful in their advertisement. And that's it. That's my 4 guidelines, my 4 advice from my experience that could slow you down and cause you to plateau. And before that, I told you how you could declench that learning, and you will feel it once you have, if you haven't already. And then plateaus might occur, they might still occur, but you need to be patient, calm, and don't panic. It's okay, it occurs for everyone. If you need more information on that subject, there is my other video on the 1 pattern you always find in language learning. Maybe this corner or this corner, I have no idea. Also, I don't want this video to be a motivational video, nor this video to tell you what to do or what not to do. My intent is just to help my fellow language learners that are struggling and that are not finding their way in language learning and that just hit plateaus. I hope that you enjoyed the video, that you got something from it. It was very fun for me to script and to present the video to you. À bientôt.